Hey everybody, welcome back to Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense, the podcast where we just talk about professional wrestling and if it makes sense or not. And so recently, well, I say recently, wrestling hasn't made sense for a long ass time, and you could argue that that is the brainchild of one single solitary man, and that's a lot to take on one man's shoulders, to bear the entire weight of the wrestling industry. But it does seem like he's done that, or he's at least tried to do that, to hold the entire industry up by himself. And of course, we're talking about Vincent Kennedy McMahon, otherwise known as Vince McMahon. And, recently I saw some articles about how Raw was... Well, we already know Raw and SmackDown are kind of suffering from ratings loss and things like that. And I saw about how recently it's been very difficult to get some of the shows ready to go. It's caused production delays for the other shows because Vince McMahon hasn't approved everything he needs to approve of, or he's making changes that they don't have time to change. It's causing delays in their own TV shows that they're already taping like a week ahead or whatever, and that's bad news. And it got me thinking, Vince McMahon's got to be, what, 80 now?
He turns 75 at the end of this month.
Well, I was off by 5 years. 75 years old. Most other people at 75 retire. Or already retired. What I mean? By the time they're 75, they're already sitting on a beach in Hawaii, drinking some kind of drink out of a half coconut. I don't know what they drink out of that half coconut. Probably coconut juice. Coconut milk, I think, is what they call it, right?
Yeah.
But it's juice more than milk, really. Anyway, we're not talking about coconuts. So really, for the last, he's been the sole force behind the WWE for the last 30, 40 years.
40 years, I'd say.
Yeah. But it feels like, well, to me anyway, and feel free to correct me, but it feels like recently, the last 10 years or so, like he definitely, he's starting to show his age, And again, you could argue that he's done this for a long time with his, nonsensical jokes and his weird segments and stuff. But I still maintain that for a long time, he was still able to pull things together and come up with a decent, coherent show. But I don't know, man. The last couple of years, it's harder and harder to justify this, and I've got to the point where I just have to admit that the show no longer can just be ran by one man.
Yeah, or at least not a man who's 75.
Yes, but it can no longer be solely run by that man, and it's just because. I think it's too much. Like, he shouldn't have had to do all this shit himself anyway. For this long. It's ridiculous. But if for example, it was 4 people in charge of, like, ultimate creative. Say it was Vince, Shane, Stephanie, and Triple H, right? Yeah. That way the load is shared across 4 people, all of whom have an extensive knowledge of the wrestling business. All of whom have been in it on the highest level, performing and coming up with ideas and stuff like that for years. So they're reliable. They're not gonna fucking come up with anything too stupid. They're not gonna come up with anything stupider than Vince McMahon already comes up with. If you have 4 people instead of 1, and I feel like that's a much better system. Because you're spreading the work out, and then shows don't have to like always have Vince McMahon's stamp of approval on it. Because if you keep trying to do it like that, it's just not gonna work.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like in business where like when businesses start growing to a certain size, the guy in charge doesn't keep looking after every little facet of the business. Like Bill Gates isn't overseeing every single little project that Microsoft do. He's kind of, hired people to do that stuff for him, so he can just keep an eye on the big picture stuff and go from there. It's like you're supposed to kind of, you're not supposed to, take control of everything and try and do everything yourself.
Right.
Whereas Vince is like, oh, well, everything's got to, conform to my vision of what needs to happen, which is fair enough considering how many years and, all the hours and stuff that he's put into making WWE the like global powerhouse that it is. But at the same time, he kind of needs to take a step back and let other people kind of do their thing as well, rather than trying to take it all on his own. And yeah, just kind of getting caught out by a bit of tunnel vision by doing that, because he's so stuck in his own ways that if anyone tries suggesting something different or trying new ideas or whatever, he's dismissive of them by all accounts. He doesn't like the whole chaos in the Raw tapings last week was just apparently stemmed from like people pitching ideas to him and him turning down every single one of them. It's like, well, how is anyone supposed to work in that kind of environment?
Right, dude. That's not productive. Like,
No.
if you're just turning down everything, well, it says a lot, I think, that like if you're unwilling to delegate like Vince McMahon is, but he's still willing to, he's sitting there waiting for other people to come up with the ideas that he's shooting down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of the control is still in his hands because he is the ultimate say-so. So all of that control is still there, but none of the creative is really coming from him.
Yeah.
So he's painting like a really weird picture where, it's very easy for work to not get done. And it says a lot about the kind of person who doesn't delegate and kind of takes that responsibility on themselves, because it means that they, A, assume that they are the only person for the job.
Mm.
And B, that's the reason they're still doing it, is because there is nobody else. Like Vince McMahon has looked for 40 years and still can't find anybody else. Like,
Yeah.
it shows a lack of faith in the people you're hiring, because you hired them. If you're turning down all of these ideas these guys are coming up with all the time, I'm like, dude, you hired them. They must have some good ideas at some point. Otherwise, you wouldn't have hired them.
Yeah. I mean, like, you look at last year where he hired Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff as the executive directors of Raw and SmackDown, respectively. Like, what a sort of nonsense title that was for a job, because they weren't really in charge of anything. They basically were still reporting to Vince, and he had the final say on whatever they were trying to, push onto the shows or whatever. So it, even when they had the chance to kind of freshen things up and do things from a different sort of point of view, like, they couldn't, because Vince is ultimately still the, the god of WWE, who, if you can't get an idea past him, then it's never going to make TV.
Exactly. Like, that process is made so much more difficult if there's only one man in charge. Whereas if Paul Heyman or Eric Bischoff, I know Bischoff wasn't really like part of creative, he was just kind of like overseeing stuff. But I know Heyman was involved with like storylines and trying to pitch to Vince and stuff. And like, you can imagine his job is going to be made like exponentially more easy if he was doing reports to Triple H instead.
Yeah.
Like, that shit would be like, because Triple H is a really good mind for the business. Like, but people have slagged off Triple H an awful lot in the past, probably ourselves included, for like his position in the company. But we're not idiots. Fucking Triple H knows wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was the most sensible one of the clique, because he just wanted to be involved in wrestling. He loves it, right?
Yeah.
So the guy knows what he's talking about. Surely Vince McMahon can see that. You know what I mean? Like, Triple H has that experience of being a wrestler, but also the experience of working behind the scenes. You would say that by all intents and purposes, that's the guy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Make him the fucking figurehead, and then he can delegate other people like Heyman and Bischoff and anybody else, right? Because then after that, if the show starts to suck, number one, it's not Vince's fault, it's Triple H's fault. So he is, gets the blame away from him. But then also, if that does start to happen, then Vince can step in and talk to Triple H. Then you have like Vince should be like the last call. He shouldn't be the first call.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Let's put it that way. Whenever I started watching wrestling, whenever Vince McMahon would come on stage, you know shit was gonna go down. That was just the way it was. Vince McMahon would come out and you're like, whoa, something's happening. You know, because he was really good. Very, very good heel. Very good at what he did, you know. And I don't know what point, like, that kind of faded away. Maybe again in the last 10 years or so. But, like, now if you see him come out, you're like, this is just an old man doing a funny walk. You know what I mean? It's more like he's doing what he is expected to do.
Yeah.
If you see Vince McMahon coming out these days, you know, it's lost a lot of its appeal and its charm and its impact, you know, because Vince McMahon no longer has a foil. He no longer has Steve Austin to play off against. So if he comes out now, it's just a little weird because you're like, why is Vince coming out, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's not dissimilar to, you know, his creative system as well. You know, back in the day, sure, he was on fire. The guy knew what he was talking about. But the longer it goes on, the more out of touch he gets. And I don't really like saying the phrase out of touch because, you know, people can you can be whatever age anybody has ever been, and you can still, like, you know what's going on in the world. So, but at the same time, Vince has proven, you know, pretty regularly that he might not be 100% on the pulse of what is going on in society and everything else these days, popular culture, what have you.
Yes.
You know, he's maybe not on the ball when it comes to that stuff.
You heard it like years ago when, you know, stuff like Paul Burchill got turned into a pirate, and Vince had no idea that it was a riff on Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff like that. Like,
there's so many of them.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Blonde Bitch Project? Do you remember this?
The Blonde Bitch Project.
You might not remember this because it never got on TV. But it was a thing between Stevie Richards and the Blue Meanie.
Right.
In 1999, I think, and they were gonna do a parody of the Blair Witch Project, which had just come out. And you remember when the Blair Witch Project came out? Fucking everybody was talking about it, and they were like, "This is great. What we'll do is we can film this ourselves." And they had like handheld cameras, and they went into like this cabin in the woods. And I think, I don't remember who was inside. Like, I don't remember who the blonde bitch was. I remember them explaining that, but I can't remember what the payoff was supposed to be because it never got finished because Vince McMahon didn't know what they were making fun of, and that was the biggest thing like going on at that time, hands down the biggest movie.
Yeah.
Right? And he had no idea what it was, so he cut it, and like that is also like, you know, detrimental because just because you don't know what something is doesn't mean it doesn't exist, you know.
Yeah.
And you do get that vibe from Vince McMahon sometimes. He's like, what the hell is this? And you're like, well, you're not the only person alive. You know what I mean? Other people have seen films and other people find this stuff funny, you know. But like, why make him a pirate to begin with? Was that his idea?
Well, I have no idea. I have no idea where it came from, but I assume it was like a Stephanie McMahon idea because I think she may have been in charge of creative back then, but who knows?
But that's exactly it, right? If Stephanie McMahon came up with that gimmick because she knew the Pirates of the Caribbean films and she lets that go, you know, she has it on TV. If Vince McMahon comes up and goes, what the hell is, I don't get it, right? Surely if she was part of this 4-man kind of creative group, she'd be like, well, this is my bit. I came up with this. I think it'll work. Give it time. I can explain what it is. You know, have a little bit of faith in me. Instead of instead of Vince McMahon just going, fuck it, I don't know what pirates are, get rid of them. You know, like you would have more room for creativity, and you know, you don't want to have too many people in the creative seats, but like if you've got one guy in charge, it's just one vision and it's one look on how things are supposed to go. But if you have a couple of people in there that can give like different points of view, then you'll get variety in your show, and you'll get more things happening, and you can see different people trying different things that one person might not have done himself, and you're like, well, this is good. This is how fucking things grow and expand and become things, you know?
Exactly. It's like writers' rooms for TV shows and stuff. And, you know, the best writers' rooms have lots of diversity in it, so you get different voices and different viewpoints and stuff, which you can kind of put all together and create like a bigger picture which appeals to like a broader audience. But if you're just kind of conforming to the vision of one guy who happens to be, you know, a 75-year-old billionaire who hasn't watched a movie since like 1969 or whatever, then how is that, you know, appealing to the masses?
Right. It's like if you were in a writer's room and you're all pitching ideas and they're all great and you all write them down and you all write them into like a coherent script, right? Which you would imagine is going to be the script that you're going to use. But instead of that, you send it off to one other guy who reads it and then changes almost all of it. You'd be like, well, what's the point, right? What is the point, you know? So yeah, not to say that what is the point of Vince McMahon, but like, you know, I think he really needs to loosen up on stuff because something needs to change. And you know, I would hate to think that the thing that changes, like say they did go to like a 4-man kind of brain trust. I would hate to think that the one thing that changes is more cinematic matches.
Yeah.
That would annoy the hell out of me. You know, if Stephanie McMahon's like, why don't we do another whatever, you know? But at the same time, I feel like you'd still get a better variety. If you look at like NXT, for example, and the way it's been booked and run, and the way Triple H has been handling stuff, and you know he's not handling all of that by himself, but he's doing a very good job of keeping it together and keeping it consistent. NXT has always been very consistent with itself and the way it's portrayed and the people involved in it. And that's something you don't get with Raw and SmackDown. You get stuff that leads nowhere, or angles are dropped, or people are dropped, or ignored, or their characters are changed, or all of this like weird, quick booking, where they're just like, fuck it, rip up the script, and today you're a surfer, you know, whatever, because kids, you know, that'll totally fly. Like that doesn't work, and it's a little schizophrenic on it, you know. It's a little bit. There's too much going on whenever they need to just strip it down and make it more fun to watch, you know. But that's the kind of thing I don't think one man can do by himself.
No, I mean, you do hear like a lot of ex WWE superstars talking about how the system's broken. Like, you could say maybe that's sour grapes from their point of view, but I don't know, because it seems like most of them are saying the exact same thing. Like, you know, EC3 said in an interview after his release that Vince pretty much only saw like one promo of his, which he thought he was acting a bit over the top in. So because of that one interview, Vince decided EC3 shouldn't speak anymore on camera, you know, taking away what's effectively one of his, you know, biggest tools of getting over. And then you look at like Eric Young, who did everything there is to do in TNA. Like, he was the epitome of like a versatile performer who could do tag matches or X Division or comedy or even being like a serious main eventer. But like he said, if you have a 3-hour TV show and you can't find something for Eric Young to do, then you failed as a leader. And it's why Jon Moxley left WWE essentially, because he called it a broken system as well. and he was just fed up with headbutting the wall over and over again, trying to get stuff done in a way that made sense and sort of gave him, encouragement and made him want to come to work and give his all and stuff. Whereas it just sounds as if the WWE environment, as kind of put forward by Vince and encouraged by Vince, is one all about stifling talent and like handcuffing them, so they're not really getting to showcase the best that they can offer because they're all conforming to like the whole 3-minute match formula, which that's probably the average sort of match time you're getting on Raw and SmackDown more often than not, and sometimes that's included in like the getting gutted by commercials as well. So like the wrestling itself is just, it's presented as being so unimportant that it makes it tough to kind of get behind superstars and kind of become invested in them again. Like I think Arn Anderson was saying in an interview as well recently how you can't send a wrestler out with just 3 minutes to work and expect them to sell, to tell a story, to get the product over, to get themselves over, to get their opponents over as well. Like that's just not enough time to do all that, which you'd say is like the bread and butter of wrestling, what it's supposed to be, like getting people over, making fans invested, making them want to come back and watch the show again. But because they're put in that situation where it's impossible to do so, nothing's connecting, and it's just no wonder that like ratings have been on this downward trend for so long, because I mean, who wants to watch that really? I mean, you can say with the pandemic and stuff, that's obviously had a negative effect on wrestling ratings like all over the shop. Like it's not just WWE that have suffered, but at the same time you look at how much Raw is down, it's scary. Like I think I read a report, it was down 29.1% in the 18 to 49 demo between February and July, which is insane. That turns into a loss of, well, they started off with 2,288,000 viewers, and now it's averaging around 1,623,000. And SmackDown's dropped even more than that. So these are worrying times for WWE, especially with like their TV deals with Fox and NBC worth so much to the company. I think they get paid like about $265 million per year by NBC and $205 million for airing on Fox as well. But how on earth are they gonna justify keeping that going after these contracts expire in like the next few years, when the ratings is as bad as they are, and like there's just no positive fan interaction anymore, like no fan interest and stuff. Like I really think we're on the path to WWE not being on TV within the next 10 years. I really wouldn't be surprised if it all ends up being shown on the network itself, just because no actual TV network wants to touch them anymore.
I don't think that would work though, because like the money they would make just from the network, that's not going to be a whole lot of money.
Yeah, but I'm thinking they won't have any choice in the matter.
It's going to be I mean, that's an interesting prediction. Interesting to even think that any of us will be here in 10 years. That's very optimistic of you. That'll be Vince McMahon's like dying breath. He'll be like, I curse the rest of humanity to die with me. And then, thanks to global warming and different viruses, he is entirely correct. There were a couple of points he brought up. A lot of the stuff you said made sense. a couple of little things I wanna point out.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I don't think the concept of the quote unquote 3 minute match is like that bad. I think that you can tell a story in 3 minutes, and I don't think that they should be like you in a show, a 3 hour show. Not every match has to be a 5-star classic.
Yeah.
That's not necessary. They don't all have to be Iron Man matches or go half an hour or whatever. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's not necessary. And you can tell a good story in 3 minutes. I think overall the problem is just, the execution of the things. I think that's your point, really.
Mm.
Is that, it's just the way that these things are put together and they come about. They don't have the proper way to express themselves,
Mm.
like a guy like Shinsuke Nakamura. They have Shinsuke Nakamura on their show. If you let him be Shinsuke Nakamura, you have a new star. Just let him do what he does, right? Because nobody moves around the ring like him. Nobody kind of has that demeanor. Nobody has that swagger and that presence, right? They hired him for a reason. Let him just do it. I think there are other guys that could do that as well, and are still putting on quality work, but a little bit blinkered.
Yeah.
They aren't able to go out and do their full capacity of stuff. Now, Dean Ambrose, John Moxley might have said that he was frustrated with the way he, his freedom and his ability to kind of put stuff together in the WWE. And I understand there would be a level of frustration for people like that. However, on the flip side, if you look at what his ideas might have been, aka all the shit he's done in All Elite Wrestling, then maybe you're like, I don't know if 100% freedom is a good idea.
I don't know. I don't think he's done anything particularly bad in AEW.
But all of his matches are hardcore matches.
Which is sort of playing to his strengths, I guess.
Is it? Because after a while, you're like, it takes the fun out of it. There's no way to have a vulnerable character there. If it's all batshit,
Yeah, the Sandman made a career out of just doing hardcore matches. Tommy Dreamer, Raven,
Oh, well, okay, but wouldn't you argue that Raven and the Sandman and Tommy Dreamer together, the three of them, put on worthy stories to go along with the violence they were giving people?
Yeah.
There was a reason behind it. There was justification. You seen what Raven did to Sandman's kids. Sandman would be pissed, and that's exactly what Raven wants him to do. I'm not. I do think that they did go overboard with a lot of that shit. Like Tommy Dreamer, I love Tommy Dreamer, but there's definitely a lot of you don't have to do all of this shit, I think that's my point. And that's to see him in ECW. I love ECW, but a lot of the stuff they did, really, looking back on it, you're like, he didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
So, it's a double-edged sword. Anyway, the point is, Vince McMahon, a little bit out of touch, and I really do believe that you're right in that he should give the wrestlers a bit more freedom, because they can work whenever they're at this point. I understand the necessity for kind of rehearsing a lot of promos if the people you're dealing with aren't great at promos, right? Because the shows usually go out live, and you don't want them to say or do anything crazy, so you have to kind of script it in order to keep them in line with what's acceptable on television. But if you have a guy like Daniel Bryan or AJ Styles or people like that who not only have been in the WWE for years but have been wrestling for years, who know their craft and who know what they're doing, you don't have to script everything for them. They know what they're doing. Other people, you give them a shot, and if it doesn't work out, you help them work it till it does work out. But to just script everything is unnecessary, and that's just more work. It's more pointless, unnecessary work.
Yeah.
You have a bunch of writers. Instead of coming up with scenarios and ways to come up with fun TV, what they're doing is they're just writing out stupid scripts for other people, and those other people wouldn't say that stuff. The writer should be doing what Vince McMahon is doing, which is approving scripts and coming up with ideas and putting things together. The wrestler should be the ones doing the nuts and bolts of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The wrestlers should be the ones. The wrestlers should be coming up with their own promos and working with agents to come up with their own matches. Right? Vince
Or at
McMahon
least
doesn't have to be involved in that.
working with the writers to come up with their promos as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's got to be a collaborative effort.
Well, exactly. If the writers are going to be writing promos, let them work with the wrestlers they're writing with or writing for, you know. But it just seems like all the way through the WWE, there's like a disconnect somewhere. You know, it doesn't all fit together. And you know, it's probably primarily because of Vince McMahon.
Mm-hmm.
Because he is the be all and end all. Everything goes through him, and if everything goes through one man, there's just not enough hours in the day for that shit.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah, he's wielding too much control over everything when he doesn't need to. He needs to have faith in, you know, his employees to be able to go out and do the job on their own. And then if they step out of line, you know, they get punished for it or whatever. Or if they do something he doesn't like, he can take them aside and point them in the right direction. But like, when everything's just so cookie cutter and like, you know, there's not a huge amount of opportunity for people to stand out and look like stars. That's why we have to keep going back to these like stars from yesteryear getting brought back time and time again, because at least them, when they were coming up in their era, they did get a chance to kind of stand out and appeal to audiences and whatnot. So it's no wonder that, like, you know, we've seen Goldberg brought back so many times, that the Undertaker's been wheeled out year after year, and Brock Lesnar, and like even recently Shane McMahon being brought back for Raw Underground, and then like the Orton stuff with Christian, Big Show, and Ric Flair. I mean, it's all about sort of the short-term fix by bringing those back, whereas what the WWE kind of need to focus on is the long-term big picture. And it just seems like there's not enough focus on that. It's almost like they're just trying to do what they can to kind of fix the ratings problem right now, but they don't really have any clue how to build an audience anymore, or kind of set things up so people will just get naturally interested in again. So it's just, yeah, it's too much reliance on the old timers being brought back, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Like, they haven't really built like a proper star in a while. You know, like John Cena, easily their last biggest big star. And nobody else has like come close to that, and I don't know why. Like, they just don't allow it to happen. But I would imagine that if Vince McMahon wasn't around, you know, Triple H would be smart enough to figure out not only who to market, but how to market that person.
Yeah,
you can do it. You could easily come up with a new John Cena and a new heel to go along with him, but they just need a chance to get that out there.
And plus, you got to listen to your audience as well. Like, you know, with Daniel Bryan, when he started getting really over with the Yes movement and stuff, and they were just super determined not to go with him at all, and yeah, they had no intention of like giving him his big WrestleMania moment at WrestleMania 30 until like fans actively started revolting against the company. And like, it was only at that point where they were like, oh shit, maybe we should just go with him just to kind of appease them for now, and then we can start pushing Roman Reigns again, you know, like 6 months down the line or whatever. So like, that's a big problem with WWE. They don't know, because when they do strike it lucky and start, you know, putting a product on TV which people are kind of interested in, like the whole Rusev Day thing, like that started getting over huge as well. But did they pull the trigger on it? No. Did they shuffle it down the card and kind of try and pretend it doesn't even exist? Yeah. I mean, I don't understand the mindset behind some of the decisions when it comes to stuff like that.
I agree with that. Yeah, like there's definitely times when you're looking at the show and you're looking at people standing out, and you're like, you can make money off this.
Mm.
Why wouldn't you want to make money off this? Like, this guy's good. He's got people behind him. Maybe it's not the way you wanted it to go, but fuck it. Like, change your plan,
Yeah.
because now you've got a better plan. And, if this new plan doesn't work, you can go back to the old plan later on. Like, if they did make Rusev a face, and the Rusev Day thing went on for a little bit, but it didn't catch on the way that they wanted it to, they were like, well, we can still switch him back to heel and continue what we were doing.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, you have to try like new things. I don't think it's a good idea to give people what they want all the time, because people don't know what they want, and that's a bad thing. But I feel like they need to. There are certain parts of the wrestling business where it's clear that people like this or don't like this for legitimate reasons,
Mm.
and a lot of the time that gets swept under the carpet, which is just bad news, and it's bad business, really. It's silly
Absolutely.
to ignore people like that in that context, when they're, I don't know. It's we see, that's it. Like, you and me are coming up with this shit and we can't do it ourselves. You know what I mean? The two of us are like, well, this is hard. How hard must it be for Vince McMahon? Like, he needs to step back.
Mm.
I think that's what we're saying. And you never know. Like, I feel like the time for Vince McMahon stepping back is edging closer and closer anyway. So maybe this whole situation might not be the thing that tips it over the edge, but it's got to be like pushing him close, where he looks at this stuff and he's like, I'm 75. He's always been a workaholic, fair enough, but like, he doesn't need to work this hard when you're 75. It's not necessary, and it's not good for the product if he continues this way.
You
know
say
what I
that,
mean?
but like, this is Vince, who's, history dictates that he's probably the most stubborn bastard that's ever existed. Like, he's always been so slow to adapt to, changes in popular culture, and he won't admit when he's wrong, and doesn't really seem to like learn any lessons from his mistakes either. So I wouldn't be surprised if Vince just keeps going and going and going. Like, did you know his mum is apparently still alive, and she just turned 100 in July? Like,
What?
yeah, so he's got the kind of genes where he's probably gonna live forever, and so we're gonna be
we can have another 25 years of this shit.
Yeah.
Oh no. Can you imagine what the cinematic matches are going to look like 25 years in the future?
Oh man, don't go there.
It's going to be spectacular.
Ugh.
Oh boy, won't that be fun? I can't even, like, that's grim. One thing I was going to say was that not quite 25, maybe 25 years ago, I'm not good with my maths. What was 20 years ago? 2000?
Yeah.
Yeah, 25 years ago. Wow, this is perfect. This is actually, wow, we're really good. 25 years ago, WWE, not in a good place.
Mm-hmm.
1995, not a great time, WWE, because they looked out of touch. They had lots of talent. They had great talent on the roster in 1995.
Mm.
They weren't being used to the right capacity. People weren't being given the chance to properly shine. They were given stupid gimmicks and ridiculous kind of nonsense, hokey feuds, and nothing was really working.
Mm.
And because the wrestling business is just like anything else, it's cyclical. It just goes around in a circle. Shit ebbs and flows, and it'll come around again. After 1995, at some point, due to some circumstances, whatever they may or may not have been, things changed. It became more cool and more relevant, and it really did. Like, looking back at the Attitude Era, it definitely wasn't perfect. There was a whole lot of shit that went on there, and that makes me go, oh, I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was different, and it was on the pulse of what was cool, and it was relevant. It was very relevant in the late 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
Things changed, and nobody thought they would. So I believe that there definitely is like a proper wrestling revolution ahead of us. I don't think that we've seen it yet, because if the revolution is cinematic matches and all elite wrestling, then I am just fed up. I'm done. Like, if this was it, I'm like, no, this has not been a success. I still think it's yet to come. I still think that there's something big gonna happen soon, and you know, it's just the way of the world. And I believe that it will not necessarily be Vince McMahon at the head of these changes.
I mean, I hope you're right, and I would love nothing more than for, you know, something to happen that made wrestling hot again and brought back all these fans. But like, the world is a much different place to where we were 25 years ago. Like, yeah, you just have to look at in terms of like the TV options right now as well. Like, there's such a wide range of different TV channels and subscription services and whatnot. So like, people just aren't watching TV in their masses like they were back 25 years ago or whatever. I think, you know, America's got a population of about 328 million, whereas you get like the highest rated cable show nowadays is like NCIS with just 11 million. So, I mean, the audience isn't really there to kind of get back to those levels that we saw in the heyday of the Attitude Era. And that's what's got me worried, that like there is no going back now. It's just going to keep declining, and no matter what they do, it's just going to keep looking more and more dire until, like I said before, like I kind of predict it might end up that wrestling doesn't really have a home on TV anymore, and it's all done through the network and whatnot. So, you know, I hope I'm wrong. I hope it isn't like, you know, irreversible, but it looks bleak, man. It really does.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I think that like, I think I think we're both right. In that I feel like I still feel like there's going to be, you know, some kind of wrestling revolution very soon that's actually going to change things and make it interesting. But at the same time, you are correct in that you look at how the television landscape has changed. You know, that whole, like, the industry is taking so many different twists and turns, even in the last 10, 15 years, you know, not even as far as 25 years ago. The whole thing is different, and it'll continue to get different. And that's the hook. We don't know what technology as a whole is going to look like in 10 years time, not even like television itself or the internet or whatever. We don't know what that medium is going to look like in 10 years time, right? Like, you look at a guy like Triple H, who's in the industry and is, you know, I wouldn't say he always has his finger on the pulse either, but like, he's more clued in to that kind of stuff because he runs a production company and is in that bubble, right? He'll know more about that kind of shit than Vince McMahon will, because right now Vince is like, oh, TV, put it on TV, right?
Yeah. I
feel like if there is going to be a revolution soon, which I still think there will be, it might not necessarily play out through the television, because in time, who knows if television's even going to be relevant. But somebody will figure out what is relevant, and they'll use that to their advantage, and then you're off to the races. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like it could happen. We don't know. But that's just it, man. We don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't know. We're just two boys trying to figure shit out. And at least we have the humility to say we don't know. Vince McMahon, you know?
Yeah. Hint, hint.
Yeah, so is there anything else you want to say about Vince McMahon and the state of well, I don't think you should talk about the state of pro wrestling today, because God, that's going to be another hour.
Yeah.
But anything else you want to say about like Vince McMahon and the way he's handling shit?
Well, I mean, just to say that, like, I take nothing away from Vince, because, you know, like him or loathe him, he did revolutionize the wrestling business and kind of took it to a global scale. But, you know, if it wasn't for Vince, there's a good chance I probably wouldn't have never fallen in love with wrestling in the first place. So, you know, he's obviously done something right once upon a time, but we're just in a different world now, and I think it's just time to kind of, for the sake of WWE's future, he should be thinking about stepping away and or just changing things up so there's more voices than his own making these decisions, and you know, it's not all on him and what he thinks is cool or, you know, going to be a rating success or whatever. Like, it just needs more diversity, I guess. And until that comes around, like, yeah, I think WWE's misfortunes in the ratings and whatnot are not going to improve much at all.
I think it's fair to say. One man just can't run this entire business by himself.
No.
It's just not going to be fun to watch. I mean, like you said, he's done a hell of a job so far, but in all, you know, in all seriousness, this one man can't do this forever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a fact that he's going to have to accept sooner or later, is that he can't do it all himself forever, you know. What age was Vince Sr.?
Oh,
he passed the torch.
I think he was relatively young, but I think he might have.
He was 17.
He was 69, but yeah, he well, that wasn't when he passed the torch. That's when he died. But yeah, I think he was 65 or thereabouts when he sold the company to Vince Jr.
Right. So if we're looking at it through McMahon eyes, surely Vince can acknowledge that he's been doing it for 10 years. He kind of went further than his dad.
Yeah.
At some point, he's just going to be like, I would use that as a way to you know, placate him. Like, hey, dude, you did better than your dad, so you can take the time off now. You know, you achieved that goal. You know, let your son try it and see how far he gets. Wink, wink. Although not too far. Don't let him make it all Raw Underground the whole fucking 3 hours. You know, that's not going to end well. Yeah. So I think we're agreed in that some things need to change.
Mm-hmm.
And we clearly both have different opinions on what's going to change.
Yes.
Either it's going to get really good at some point, or it'll all just disappear. And there'll be no more wrestling. Either way, you know, I'm all right with either of them, to be honest with you. I mean, if it gets better, great. But if it disappears, then that means no more cinematic matches. So, you know, I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What does everybody else think about Vince McMahon? That crazy old coot. I call him a coot, and not anything else. Yeah, dude, let us know what you guys think about Vince McMahon. Has it been a little bit too long? Has his time passed? You know, what could he do better? Let us know in the comments, and remember to stick around because we'll be doing some more fun podcasts soon. So yeah, dude, thanks for listening, guys. We really appreciate it. And we're going to wrap this one up. We'll see you in the next episode. To take it easy.